They kicked the homeless man out of the store. He returned hours later as the secret millionaire owner. The heavy mahogany door of the meeting room seemed to absorb all sound, leaving only a suffocating silence that pressed down on Brenda Sterling. Her finely plucked eyebrows furrowed, deepening the lines of concern that marred her usually placid forehead as her gaze fixed on the old man standing defiantly in the center of the room. The air was thick, not just with unspoken tension, but with the stale scent of ambition and old coffee. Dim lights from the overhead fixtures cast long shadows, accentuating the delicate network of wrinkles etched onto the old man's face. His eyes, though weary with age, held a surprising glint, a blend of profound wisdom and an almost unbearable sadness. The words he had uttered moments before still reverberated in the stunned silence, a chilling echo that no one in the room seemed capable of truly comprehending. "The game is over," Silas Thorne had declared, his voice, despite the burden of his 78 years, surprisingly firm, imbued with an unyielding resolve. "This charade ends now." Brenda, a smirk playing on her lips, leaned back in her plush leather chair, a picture of dismissive arrogance. Beside her, Chad O'Malley crossed his arms, rolling his eyes with a sneer that clearly communicated his utter contempt. To them, the man before them was nothing more than a grumpy old relic, perhaps senile, certainly a ghost clinging desperately to the faded glory of the company's past. It never occurred to them that the words they had just heard carried the weight of a powerful, relentless vengeance, a force they had underestimated with catastrophic hubris. "Over?" Brenda's voice was a shard of ice, each word dripping with the disdain she felt for the old man's presumptuousness. "Mr. Thorne, I believe your memory might be failing you with age. The game, as it stands, is played by our rules. You chose to step aside years ago, willingly removing yourself from this very game. I fail to grasp why you've suddenly returned now, spouting these nonsensical threats." Chad scoffed, a contemptuous snort escaping his nostrils. "Perhaps he's bored, Brenda. Missing the good old days. After all, Thorne's Emporium was just a single shop in his time. Now, it's a colossal chain with hundreds of branches. I suppose all this greatness might be a little intimidating for him." A cruel laugh escaped him, a sound that grated on Silas's ears. Silas's gaze lingered on the smug grin plastered across Chad's face. The young man's arrogance ignited a deep, simmering pain within his chest. The thought that this empire, which he had meticulously built with his own sweat and blood, had fallen into the hands of such soulless, avaricious individuals, sickened him to his core. Yet, his expression remained impassive, a mask of calm determination. He slowly surveyed each person in the room. The contempt, disbelief, and utter indifference etched on their faces only served to harden his resolve, forging it into an unbreakable will. With a deliberate slowness, Silas reached into the inner pocket of his tailored blazer. His fingers closed around a small, ornate metal key. He pulled it out, holding it up for them to see. Etched into its worn surface was the original, intricately carved logo of Thorne's Emporium, the very first iteration, a design he had personally sketched decades ago. This key, he remembered vividly, was the one he had used to unlock the doors of his very first shop on its opening day. Brenda and Chad merely glanced at it, their eyes dismissing it as an antiquated trinket, a symbol of forgotten insignificance. But for Silas, it was more than just a key, it was the heart, the soul, and the founding principles of his entire empire, condensed into a single, tangible object. "I know you don't understand," Silas said, his voice a quiet prelude to a coming storm. "But you will, very soon. The game truly is over. And this time, I'm setting the rules." Brenda impatiently waved a dismissive hand. All right, we don't have time for this old man's dramatics. We have a board meeting to attend, and we simply cannot be bothered with your meaningless performances. Chad strode towards the door, his movements sharp and impatient, and swung it open. "Mr. Thorne, I'm trying to be polite, but you really need to leave now. This isn't entertainment, it's a serious business meeting. Please, wait in the lobby outside, or..." Silas cut Chad off mid-sentence. His eyes, which moments before had held a distant weariness, suddenly blazed with an icy determination. "No, Chad. I no longer need to wait outside. In fact, it is you who will be thrown out of this building." A sudden, jarring silence fell upon the room. Brenda's mocking smile slowly froze on her face, her eyes widening almost imperceptibly. Chad's hand remained suspended on the doorknob, his posture rigid. The old man's words, though delivered calmly, now felt heavier, more menacing than a mere threat. They had never seen him so resolute, so utterly self-assured. Yet, clinging to their preconceived notions, they chose to believe it was still nothing more than the empty bluster of a senile old man. They were still blissfully unaware that their nightmare had, in fact, already begun. The foundation of their carefully constructed world was about to crumble. Silas Thorne, the venerable founder of Thorne's Emporium, had dedicated his life to building a legacy rooted in integrity, unwavering diligence, and a profound respect for every individual. At 78 years old, Silas reflected on his youth, a time when his journey began with a single, humble shop. Back then, his store was more than just a place of commerce. It was the vibrant heart of the neighborhood, a gathering spot where neighbors converged, shared stories, and fostered a deep sense of mutual respect and trust. Customers were known by name, their life stories woven into the fabric of daily interactions, and employees were cherished as extensions of his own family. For Silas, business was never merely about accumulating wealth, it was a profound commitment to serving the community, creating opportunities, and truly touching people's lives. This deeply ingrained philosophy had been the very bedrock upon which Thorne's Emporium had blossomed from a regional success into a sprawling national chain. Yet, as the relentless march of years continued, an insidious transformation began to unfold within the company he cherished. Silas, his health gradually faltering, found himself compelled to slowly relinquish his direct involvement in the day-to-day operations. He entrusted the reins of management to a younger generation of executives, individuals deemed more dynamic and market-oriented. Initially, this transition brought him a measure of satisfaction. The company's continued growth and modernization seemed a natural evolution, a testament to the enduring legacy he had created. However, as time wore on, disquieting whispers began to reach his ears, suggesting that with this expansion, the very soul of the company was being irrevocably lost. The murmurs grew louder, forming a dissonant chorus of complaints, declining customer service, plummeting employee morale, and a chilling prioritization of profit margins over fundamental human dignity. Though Silas had retreated into a quiet retirement, his connection to the outside world, particularly the pulse of his company, remained strong. In recent times, his disquiet had intensified, fueled by the increasingly alarming comments he encountered on online consumer complaint forums and the poignant, often desperate, posts from former employees on social media. "Thorne's Emporium isn't what it used to be," read one comment, a bitter echo of his own fears. "It's just a money-making machine now," another lamented, painting a grim picture. "Employees are treated like robots, and management is cruel," cried a third, each word a dagger to his heart. But what truly pierced him, causing him sleepless nights and a deep, gnawing despair, were the persistent allegations of discrimination against elderly and unkempt individuals who dared to enter his stores. The thought that the brand he had meticulously built, a sanctuary intended to embrace everyone, now closed its doors to the vulnerable and the marginalized, was an unbearable torment. These whispers, growing into a deafening roar of discontent, ignited a profound and unsettling doubt within Silas. Had his company truly veered so far from its foundational values? In the meticulously orchestrated board meetings, his CEO and other high-ranking executives consistently presented gleaming reports, soaring profit margins, impressive growth charts, and meticulously crafted customer satisfaction surveys that painted an idyllic picture of success. Yet, Silas, with his deep understanding of human nature and the true pulse of his business, knew intimately how disconnected these paper successes could be from the lived experiences of real people. To witness the empire he had painstakingly cultivated rise at the cost of trampling his core ideals was nothing short of a living nightmare. Then, one day, a radical, audacious idea blossomed in Silas's mind, a seed of desperation nurtured by his profound sense of betrayal. The only way to uncover the unvarnished truth, he realized with chilling clarity, was to immerse himself in the very heart of it. But going as a revered CEO or the esteemed founder would yield only a sanitized, fabricated reality. Everyone, from the lowest clerk to the highest executive, would present their most polished, deceptive facade. No, he would have to conceal his true identity. He had to enter not as a titan of industry, but as one of the most vulnerable, the most discarded, the most marginalized. For years, this meticulously conceived project had simmered in his thoughts, every detail refined, every contingency planned with meticulous precision. It demanded a transformation so complete, a disguise so profound, that he would become utterly unrecognizable. His plan, deceptively simple in its core, was meticulously intricate in its execution. He would enter one of Thorne's Emporium's most prestigious flagship branches disguised as an old, unkempt, perhaps even homeless man. He would don a worn, faded coat, his hair would be disheveled, a scruffy beard would obscure his familiar features, and a battered walking stick would lend an authentic tremor to his stooped posture. For weeks, he worked tirelessly with a team of professional makeup artists and costume specialists. Their task was not merely to alter his external appearance. They meticulously trained him to transform his gait, to modulate his voice, even to shift the very expression in his eyes. His objective was unequivocal: to evoke absolutely no hint of a wealthy businessman. He had to become an utterly ordinary, even socially undesirable, figure. This radical test was not merely an endeavor to assess the true state of his company, it was also a profound opportunity to observe the deepest strata of human nature. He yearned to witness how people treated those they perceived as weaker, more vulnerable, or utterly inconsequential. He was consumed by a desperate curiosity: could the company that was meant to embody his core values possibly pass such a brutal, uncompromising test? Deep within his heart, a fragile sliver of hope still flickered. Perhaps the stories were merely exaggerated rumors. Perhaps Brenda and Chad, and managers like them, were isolated exceptions, anomalies in an otherwise sound structure. Yet, the results of this harrowing test would ultimately confirm his gravest fears, a confirmation that would inevitably ignite an unyielding quest for justice, a righteous fury that had long lain dormant. As Silas Thorne stepped through the gleaming, opulent doors of Thorne's Emporium, clad in a tattered, worn-out coat, his face pale and etched with weariness, his hands trembling slightly, the crushing weight of time seemed to settle heavily upon his shoulders. His once meticulously groomed hair was now a tangled mess, his usually clean-shaven jaw obscured by a straggly, gray-flecked beard. His eyes, usually sharp and discerning, now held a deep, profound sadness. He moved through the bustling aisles like a forgotten spirit, an anonymous figure swallowed by the city's indifferent tide. The store's dazzling brilliance, its contrived cheer, and the frantic consumption frenzy within created a stark, almost cruel, contrast to the desolate aura that clung to him. Inside, customers glided past him, their gazes unfocused, their minds preoccupied, as if he were nothing more than a translucent phantom, a ripple in the air they didn't even register. However, from a vantage point where every corner of the lavish store was under surveillance, a pair of sharp, calculating eyes immediately pinpointed his presence. Brenda Sterling stood before one of the gleaming, immaculately polished display cases, her eyes performing a meticulous mental scan of every customer who entered. Her gaze snagged on Silas, a flicker of irritation crossing her features. Her eyebrows immediately drew together in a sharp, disapproving V. This undesirable guest, a stain on the store's pristine image, had triggered her obsessive need for order and perfection. In Brenda's meticulously organized mind, such individuals were nothing more than potential problems, theft risks, or, at best, a visual blight. Even a single speck of dirt left by his worn-out shoes on the store's mirror-like floor would have been an intolerable transgression in her eyes. Chad. Brenda's voice, sharp and decisive, cut through the ambient murmur of the store, echoing with an almost military precision down the pristine aisles. To aisle 3, now. Chadwick O'Malley, at that moment, was berating a young, visibly nervous employee about the precise alignment of a shelf display. The sound of Brenda's voice made him snap to attention, a familiar, arrogant smirk already forming on his lips. His eyes, upon spotting Silas, mirrored Brenda's disgust with startling clarity. Chad relished these assignments, the ones where he had to handle problematic customers. It was, for him, a crude display of power, a golden opportunity to prove his efficiency and ruthless loyalty to his superiors. He puffed out his chest slightly, a predatory glint in his eyes. Silas continued to drift slowly through the store's vast apartments, his movements almost imperceptible, as if trying to merge with the background. His gaze, however, found an anchor, settling on the toys section, a place that held a special, poignant significance from his own childhood. He remembered the simple wooden toys, the intricate miniature train sets. He recalled with a bittersweet ache how much he had cherished such humble, handcrafted toys in his very first store, a place where imagination, not profit, was the currency. The current store's shelves, however, were crammed with gleaming plastic contraptions and the latest high-tech electronic gadgets, a stark, almost painful contrast. With a heavy sigh, tinged with nostalgia and a deep sadness, he slowly reached out his hand, his fingers trembling slightly, towards an old, beautifully carved wooden horse figure that seemed out of place amidst the modern glitter. It was a tangible link to a past he desperately yearned for. But his hand never quite made contact with the toy. A harsh, unyielding grip clamped down on his wrist, startling him. "Hey, Grandpa. Where do you think you're going?" Chad's voice, piercingly loud in the relatively quiet aisle, was laden with an almost unbearable contempt. "These are for display, no touching. Especially not with hands like yours." Silas slowly turned his gaze towards Chad. The young man's face, contorted with undisguised arrogance, filled him with a profound sense of dismay. "I was just looking, son," Silas replied, his voice a frail tremor, yet imbued with an unexpected core of resilience. "These toys, they used to be my favorites." Chad let out a derisive, barking laugh, a sound devoid of humor. "Your favorites? I'm sure they were. But this isn't a museum, it's a store. And this store has rules. We don't allow people with not a single penny in their pocket to loiter around here. What are you looking for? Food? Shelter? This isn't a soup kitchen, understand?" A sharp, searing pain tore through Silas's heart. This, he thought, was his own child, his own creation, sullied and defiled. And now, within the very walls of his legacy, he was being treated like a vagrant, a pariah. "I merely," Silas's voice trailed off, the words catching in his throat. Chad's expression of utter disdain was so potent, so overwhelming, that it choked off his ability to speak. Just then, Brenda, drawn by the commotion, drew closer, her sharp, piercing gaze raking over Silas from head to toe, a look of cold assessment. "Chad, what is going on here? Why is this man still inside? He's not a customer. He's a potential liability. He's ruining the store's image." Her voice was a low, dangerous hiss, barely audible above the store's ambient music, yet its intensity made Chad snap to attention. "He has no money on him, Brenda," Chad declared, gesturing towards Silas as if he were an exhibit in a zoo. "He's just wandering around. I think he's looking for a warm place to sleep outside." A look of profound disgust contorted Brenda's features. "Get him out of here immediately. And warn him not to come near this place again. This is not a charity. This store exists to serve an exclusive clientele." Silas took a deep, shuddering breath. His eyes, though weary, locked onto Brenda's. A flicker of something cold and dangerous ignited deep within their depths. Exclusive clientele? Thorne's Emporium was always a place that opened its doors to people from all walks of life. In my vision, rich or poor, everyone was to be treated with equal dignity and respect. Brenda let out a derisive, humorless laugh. "Oh, wow, the old man has a vision. Your vision, I believe, ended before the company went bankrupt. Now, this place is run by my vision, understand? And in my vision, there's no place for people like you." Her words were a chilling declaration, a testament to her utter lack of empathy. Chad's grip on Silas's arm tightened, digging painfully into his flesh. "All right, Grandpa. Out. If you don't leave politely, I'll have to physically remove you. Silas's aged body swayed precariously under Chad's harsh grip. His muscles, though still possessing a surprising resilience, were no match for the young man's brutish strength. But in his eyes, a flicker of passive resignation was conspicuously absent. Instead, a cold, unyielding resolve began to shine, a quiet fury that promised retribution. This humiliation, he realized, was far worse than he had anticipated. To be treated like a criminal, exposed to the indifferent gazes of other customers in the very heart of his own store, was a profound betrayal. Some customers cast curious glances, a few quickly averted their eyes, feigning disinterest. None intervened, none offered a word of protest. This chilling silence deepened the agony in Silas's heart. To feel so utterly alone and debased in the place he had poured his very soul into building, it was unbearable. Chad, seemingly reveling in his perceived authority, began to drag Silas with deliberately quick and harsh steps towards the store's main exit. Silas's worn walking stick slipped from his grasp, clattering loudly against the polished floor. The sound, sharp and intrusive in the bustling corridors of the store, echoed like a hammer blow. Silas tried to reach for his fallen cane, but Chad, with a cruel jerk, prevented him. As he was shoved through the heavy automatic doors and out onto the cold sidewalk, the biting wind lashed against his face, a physical manifestation of the raw pain he felt. "And don't you ever come back here," Chad shouted, his voice a harsh bark, as he slammed the door shut with an unnecessary, resounding thud behind Silas. Silas staggered on the pavement, his body trembling uncontrollably in the biting cold. But the tremor that shook him from within was not solely from the frigid air, it was a tremor born of simmering rage and profound disappointment. He slowly collected himself, his old bones aching, and stooped to retrieve his fallen cane from the icy ground. His eyes, now filled with a steely resolve, fixed on the brightly lit display windows of his store. Inside, through the gleaming glass, he could clearly see Brenda and Chad, their faces contorted in triumphant sneers, basking in the twisted satisfaction of having cleansed their pristine establishment. Just then, a young woman emerged from the store's side entrance, her movements quick and furtive, as if she were a shadow trying to avoid notice. In her hand, she held a slightly crushed sandwich and a half-empty bottle of water, clearly discards from a few hours earlier. Her name was Alara, one of the store's youngest and lowest-paid employees. For days, she had been desperately searching for extra work, driven by the crushing weight of her mother's spiraling hospital bills. She meticulously saved every penny, even sacrificing her own meager lunch breaks. Despite her own precarious circumstances, her gaze lingered on the old man who had just been so cruelly ejected. She had witnessed Brenda and Chad's callous treatment of him, and a pang of deep sympathy had twisted in her gut. Alara hesitated for a moment, then slowly approached Silas. Her face was etched with genuine sadness, a quiet empathy that shone in her tired eyes. "Excuse me, sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a desperate attempt to avoid drawing any attention. "I am so sorry. I can't believe they treated you like that. Please, would you accept this?" Alara extended the half-eaten sandwich and the water bottle towards Silas, her hand trembling slightly. Her face conveyed a deep compassion, tinged with a profound sense of shame, as if she herself bore the burden of their actions. Silas, startled by this unexpected act of kindness, looked up at Alara's face. He saw no pity there, no condescension, only a pure, unadulterated humanity. While others had scorned and ostracized him, this young woman, despite her own hardships, extended a hand of genuine comfort. This small, unexpected gesture melted the icy despair that had begun to solidify in Silas's soul. As he took the sandwich and water, his gaze met Alara's. "Thank you, child," he said, his voice softer, more heartfelt than it had been in years. This means a great deal." Alara nodded slightly, a faint, weary smile gracing her lips. "Please, take care of yourself." Then, with a hurried movement, she slipped back into the bustling store, as if her brief act of compassion had been a transgression itself. Silas looked down at the sandwich and water in his hands. It was not merely sustenance, it was a beacon, a small, flickering spark of the humanity, conscience, and empathy he had feared was utterly lost. In the chilling corporate ruthlessness displayed by Brenda and Chad, Ilara's quiet yet powerful gesture showed Silas that hope still existed, that the essence of his founding vision had not been entirely extinguished. It also, however, confirmed in the most painful way possible how deeply managers like Brenda and Chad had corroded the very soul of his company. The resolve in his heart, once a mere spark, had now ignited into a blazing inferno. He would return. And when he did, no one would ever again underestimate his true power. This was no longer just a business matter, it was a profound quest to reclaim the very soul of his legacy. 2 days later, the flagship store of Thorne's Emporium buzzed with a palpable, almost suffocating tension. Brenda Sterling, clipboard clutched tightly in her hand, barked out last-minute instructions to the employees scattered throughout the sprawling retail space. Her face, usually a mask of rigid authority, seemed even more taut, stretched thin by an undercurrent of barely suppressed anxiety. News had arrived of an unexpected, high-level inspection from corporate headquarters. This was no ordinary audit, it was to be personally led by the chairman of the board and the CEO themselves. Brenda, obsessed with presenting her store as flawlessly perfect, had meticulously double-checked every single detail, down to the last perfectly aligned shoelace. For her, this was more than just an inspection, it was a pivotal moment in her career, a chance to solidify her position, perhaps even secure a coveted promotion. Everyone to your stations. Everything must gleam. There is no room for error today. Brenda's voice, sharp and commanding, resonated through the store's polished aisles, amplified by the strategically placed overhead speakers. Chadwick O'Malley stood near the main entrance, meticulously adjusting the lapels of his impeccably tailored suit. He was as nervous as Brenda, but also brimming with a desperate hope that this inspection would pave the way for his own advancement. In his warped perception, the store's pristine order and its purging of undesirable elements were direct achievements of his own ruthless efficiency. He imagined himself already stepping into a new, more powerful role. Precisely at that moment, the store's automatic glass doors slid silently open. The figure who stepped inside caused an immediate, collective intake of breath from every employee within sight. Dressed in a shimmering, dark navy suit, his shoulders held ramrod straight, his silver hair meticulously styled, and his polished shoes reflecting the bright store lights, he exuded an aura of quiet power. Though nearing 80, his every step was imbued with an undeniable resolve, his bearing radiating an aristocratic dignity that instantly transformed the entire atmosphere of the store. Beside him walked 2 formally dressed lawyers, their faces impassive and professional, and 3 high-ranking executives, including the company's current CEO. This small entourage, with every measured stride, personified an unassailable authority and immense power. Brenda and Chad, their faces quickly adopting their most practiced, saccharine smiles, swiftly moved forward to greet these imposing guests. Brenda's voice, though eager, trembled slightly with a mixture of excitement and barely contained apprehension. "Welcome, Mr." Brenda's voice abruptly caught in her throat, strangled by a sudden, terrifying realization. The man in the navy suit had slowly turned his head towards her. The expression on his face was startlingly different from the profound sadness and weariness that had etched the face of the old man just 2 days prior. This face was sharp, resolute, his jaw set with an almost granite-like determination. When his eyes, piercing and unnervingly familiar, locked with Brenda's, her heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread. That gaze, it was disturbingly familiar. That posture, it resonated with a forgotten memory. Silas Thorne slowly extended his hand, his grip firm as he shook the CEO's hand. "My apologies for the delay, Alan," he said, his voice powerful and clear, resonating through the vast expanse of the store, commanding attention. "I was a little late. I had some business to attend to." A subtle, almost imperceptible smirk played on his lips. Brenda's manufactured smile slowly withered on her face, like a flower exposed to a sudden frost. Chad's arrogant smirk, too, dissolved, replaced by a look of dawning horror, a grotesque mask of disbelief. Their hearts simultaneously felt as if they had been struck by an invisible sledgehammer. It couldn't be. This man, was he the homeless, decrepit beggar they had so cruelly dismissed? But how? The thought clawed at their minds, cold and sharp. Silas turned his gaze directly to Brenda, his eyes holding a faint, almost cruel, glint of amusement. A subtle, mocking smile slowly spread across his lips. "You don't recognize me, Brenda," he said, his voice rising in an almost theatrical, taunting tone. "Just 2 days ago, I was practically thrown out of this very store. You even stated that someone undesirable like me didn't belong in your exclusive establishment, didn't you?" Brenda's face went bone white, as if all the blood had drained from it. Words caught in her throat, a choked gasp escaping her lips. Her eyes, wide with terror, stared blankly, her mouth agape in shocked disbelief. Chad's complexion had turned a ghastly shade of green, and his knees had begun to buckle, threatening to give way beneath him. Simultaneously, the full, horrifying memory of the humiliating incident 2 days prior flooded their minds. They now understood, with chilling clarity, the unwavering determination that had burned in the old man's eyes. This was no coincidence. This was a test. And they had failed it, catastrophically. Unbelievable. Chad whispered, his voice barely a coherent sound, choked with rising panic. This is impossible." Silas turned his gaze to Chad, his expression cold and unyielding. "Impossible, Chad?" What was truly impossible was for the founder of this company to be treated like dirt in his own store. What was truly impossible was for my vision to rot so completely in the hands of soulless managers like you. His voice gained a chilling edge, the words cutting through the stunned silence. The other employees scattered throughout the store began to whisper amongst themselves, their voices hushed, filled with a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. Some recognized Silas, their faces reflecting a mixture of shock and awe, others wore expressions of sheer bewilderment. Elara stood at the very back, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a nascent, terrifying understanding. She was the one who had helped the old man 2 days ago. And now, that old man stood before her, revealed as the legendary founder of Thorne's Emporium. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs, her entire body trembling with the weight of the moment. Silas took a step forward, his stance radiating an unshakable power. His voice, strong and commanding, rose to fill the entire store, silencing every whisper. "I am Silas Thorne, the founder and principal shareholder of Thorne's Emporium. And 2 days ago, I came to this store to witness the true face of my company and its employees. All those complaints I heard, the allegations of corruption. I wanted to see it all with my own eyes." Silas's gaze swept over Brenda and Chad, lingering on their ashen faces. "And sadly, what I witnessed confirmed my very worst fears. Managers devoid of empathy, rude, solely preoccupied with profit margins and superficial image. You have utterly lost the soul of the company I painstakingly built." Brenda, her voice a desperate, trembling whisper, finally managed to speak. "Mr. Thorne, please, this is a misunderstanding. We were merely enforcing the rules." Her voice was laced with a desperate plea, a futile attempt to salvage her crumbling world. "Rules?" Silas's voice was as cold as ice, each syllable a pronouncement of judgment. "Trampling on human dignity, insulting an old man, throwing him out of his own store. Are these your rules?" "My rules were always built on respect, integrity, and compassion. People like you are contaminating my legacy." CEO Allen, sensing the gravity of the moment and Silas's unwavering resolve, stepped forward, turning his face, now contorted with unconcealed fury, to Brenda and Chad. "You heard Mr. Thorne. This scandal has deeply shaken the company's reputation. The board of directors will absolutely not tolerate this." Silas, his gaze returning to Brenda and Chad for his final, damning words, paused. In his eyes, there was neither pity nor remorse. Only a cold, sharp sense of immutable justice. "Your game at Thorne's Emporium is truly over. And this time, it's forever. As Silas Thorne's words echoed through the store's high ceilings, Brenda Sterling's and Chadwick O'Malley's carefully constructed worlds shattered around them. The words, delivered with a calm, unyielding force, felt like an invisible current, tearing them from their very moorings. Their faces, already pale with shock, first drained to a ghastly white, then flushed a mottled red with a mixture of humiliation and impotent rage. This singular moment, hanging suspended in the shocked silence of the store, marked the abrupt, irrevocable end of their careers, their reputations, and every last vestige of their future hopes. No. This cannot be happening. Brenda's voice ascended into a hysterical shriek, a raw, desperate sound of disbelief. Her jaw trembled uncontrollably, and her eyes, wide and wild, darted frantically around the room, searching for an escape, a denial, anything to cling to. This is unjust. I gave my life to this store. Don't you see how much I increased profitability? Silas merely raised a single eyebrow, his gaze unwavering as he fixed it upon Brenda. Profitability, yes. But at what cost, Brenda? Profit gained by trampling on human souls is, in my eyes, utterly worthless. The company I built was never merely about numbers. It was a family, a community. You, however, have transformed it into a cold, dehumanizing prison. Chad, struck dumb by the sheer magnitude of the revelation, found his tongue completely useless. His knees, weakened by an overwhelming rush of terror, threatened to buckle, making it nearly impossible for him to remain standing. All the arrogance, all the smug superiority he had felt mere minutes ago, had evaporated, replaced by an unspeakable dread. All his carefully laid plans, his soaring ambitions, the coveted promotion he had envisioned, all of it had vanished in an instant, reduced to dust. "Please, Mr. Thorne," he mumbled, his voice a barely audible croak, thick with desperation. "Just give me another chance. I swear, I will never again." Silas's eyes lingered for a moment on Chad's pleading face. "Never again? The kindness and mercy you showed me just days ago, Chad, will forever be etched in my memory. This test was not merely for me, it was a brutal examination of your true characters. And you, in your callousness, failed spectacularly." His voice, though calm, resonated with an undeniable finality. Silas turned to CEO Allen, who stood beside him, his expression grim and resolute. Allen, understanding Silas's unspoken command, nodded almost imperceptibly. "Allen, initiate all necessary procedures. Brenda Sterling and Chadwick O'Malley will have absolutely no further affiliation with Thorne's Emporium, effective immediately. All their authorizations and access shall be revoked without delay. Furthermore, regarding this incident, a comprehensive review of all past customer complaints and employee reports concerning them will be conducted. Should any irregularities, harassment, or abuse be identified, the appropriate legal proceedings will be initiated without hesitation." Brenda's face flushed a deep, mottled purple. "You can't do this. You can't fire me. I've worked in this industry for decades." Her words were a desperate, futile protest. "I already have, Brenda," Silas stated, his voice calm but undeniably final. "And rest assured, your career from this point forward will be considerably more challenging. This incident will become common knowledge throughout the industry. Everyone has now seen, in the starkest possible terms, how you truly treat people. No one will ever again believe that a manager like you would be a sound investment for their company." The store's security guards, acting on the precise instructions conveyed by Silas's lawyers, began to move purposefully towards Brenda and Chad. Brenda, still shouting and protesting in a desperate, last-ditch effort, found her words dissolving into the vast, indifferent space of the store. Chad, on the other hand, walked silently, his head bowed in utter defeat, as he was escorted towards the exit. Their reign of power within this store had come to an abrupt and ignominious end. As they were led out, they could not bring themselves to lift their heads, passing under the curious, and for some, secretly triumphant, gazes of the other employees. They were gone. The stunned silence that had pervaded the store slowly gave way to a hushed murmur of whispers. Everyone was still reeling from the shock of this dramatic revelation. Silas's eyes, however, were already scanning the crowd, searching for a specific face. He spotted Alara standing in the furthest corner of the store, amidst a cluster of other employees, her face etched with a mixture of shock and a subtle flicker of fear. It was difficult for her to grasp that her small act of kindness had ignited such a monumental event. Silas, a gentle smile gracing his lips, began to walk towards her. His steps, so different from the weary, faltering shuffle of 2 days prior, were now firm and purposeful, radiating quiet strength. Alara, seeing him approach her directly, flinched slightly. She feared the old man might be angry with her, perhaps for being inadvertently drawn into such a grand, public spectacle. "Alara," Silas said, his voice soft and paternal, yet clear enough to be heard by everyone in the store. You did something incredibly important for me that day. You showed me that this company still possessed a soul. You reminded me that kindness still existed in this world." Alara, her eyes welling up with tears, stammered, I just, sir." Silas smiled warmly. "You simply followed the dictates of your heart. And that, my dear, is the most precious thing in the world. That day, the sandwich and water you offered me were worth more than all the profits this store has ever generated. Because they were pieces of pure, unadulterated humanity." Silas reached into his pocket and subtly handed a document to CEO Allen. Allen, understanding Silas's intent without a word, then presented a sealed envelope to Alara. Alara took the envelope with trembling hands, her eyes wide with bewilderment, unsure of its contents. "Alara," Silas said, his voice now taking on a more serious, deliberate tone. "People like you should be the future of this company. Individuals like you are capable of truly upholding the values of Thorne's Emporium. For this reason, I am offering you a new position, assistant store manager. And this is merely the beginning. Furthermore, for the courage and humanity you displayed that day, the check inside this envelope is for you. I hope you can use it for your mother, and to pursue your own dreams. This is a small token of my profound gratitude." As Alara slowly opened the envelope, her eyes widened in disbelief at the sight of the amount on the check. It was a figure with 5 zeros, a sum she could not have even dared to dream of. Her heart pounded in her chest, threatening to burst. The crushing burden of her mother's hospital bills, the relentless financial struggles of her family, all of it suddenly lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief and hope. This was not just money, it was a new life, a blinding beacon of possibility. "Mr. Thorne," Alara's voice was a trembling whisper, choked with emotion. I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. This is unbelievable." Silas smiled gently, his eyes filled with a quiet satisfaction. "No, Alara. It is I who should thank you. You reminded me of the most valuable asset my own store possesses, humanity." The other employees in the store watched Alara with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. For some, it felt like a scene from a fairy tale, a moment of pure, unexpected magic. Against the brutal backdrop of Brenda and Chad's callousness, Alara's small, heartfelt act of kindness had brought her a reward beyond her wildest imagination. Justice, in its most striking and poignant form, had been served. Months unfolded, bringing with them a profound transformation to Thorne's Emporium. With Silas Thorne's active return to the helm of the company, a radical and deeply rooted change had swept through every facet of the business. Customer service, once a mere formality, was once again championed as the company's paramount focus. The rigid, often dehumanizing, treatment of employees was softened, replaced by an ethos of respect and empathy that had been meticulously reinfused into the very fabric of the corporate culture. The stores, no longer mere points of sale, transcended their transactional purpose, blossoming once more into vibrant hearts of the community, much like Silas's original humble shop in his youth. The company's reputation, once tarnished by scandal, had not only recovered but had soared to new heights, buoyed by the dramatic revelations and the subsequent, heartfelt process of corporate redemption. Silas Thorne, having emerged from his quiet retirement, was now fully re-engaged with the company he had founded. The weariness that had once shadowed his features had receded, replaced by an expression of profound serenity and wisdom. Each morning, he made it a ritual to visit the stores, engaging in warm conversations with employees, listening intently to customer feedback, and immersing himself in the daily operations. No one dared to treat him as a nobody now. He was the living legend of Thorne's Emporium, a revered figure whose presence brought a palpable sense of renewed purpose. The painful yet necessary lessons gleaned from his undercover test had only strengthened his resolve to rescue the true soul of his company. The purging of managers like Brenda and Chad felt akin to the excision of a toxic tumor, a vital step towards healing and restoration. Ilara's life, meanwhile, had been utterly transformed, blooming in ways she could have never foreseen. Her elevation to assistant store manager was merely the beginning of her ascent, a testament to her inherent worth. The substantial check she had received had not only covered her mother's spiraling medical expenses but had also significantly alleviated her family's crippling financial burdens. Now, a genuine, heartfelt smile graced her face, a constant beacon of her newfound peace. Within the store, she treated everyone, from the lowest-ranking cleaning staff to the highest-level managers, with the same unwavering respect and compassion. Her merciful and fair leadership had completely reshaped the store's atmosphere, infusing it with a warmth and authenticity that had long been absent. Customers, sensing Ilara's inherent kindness and helpful spirit, felt a deeper connection to the store, their loyalty growing with each interaction. Ilara was the embodiment of that true humanity Silas had desperately sought, and now, she was actively helping to spread these fundamental values to every corner of Thorne's Emporium. The fates of Brenda Sterling and Chadwick O'Malley, however, spiraled in the diametrically opposite direction. Following their swift dismissal, their reputations within the industry had been utterly annihilated. The humiliating tale of Silas Thorne's undercover experience in his own store had spread like wildfire, recounted in hushed tones and cautionary whispers across every corporate boardroom. No company, in its right mind, was willing to risk its own image by employing two executives with such a damning track record. Brenda found herself plunged into a devastating financial crisis, her opulent lifestyle abruptly shattered, replaced by the harsh realities of debt and struggle. Chad, consumed by his own monumental hubris and ruthless ambition, paid the ultimate price, unable to secure employment anywhere. For them, the relentless pursuit of money and status, achieved by trampling on human decency, had exacted a cruel and ironic toll. The greatest irony, perhaps, was that the very poor Silas Thorne, whom they had so disdainfully dismissed, had orchestrated their downfall, ensnaring them in the very trap of their own insatiable greed. This story, woven from the threads of justice and human nature, whispers of the profound importance of true character that shines brightest in the darkest hours, and of empathy, the most precious virtue of humanity. In life's intricate labyrinth, discerning the true intentions hidden behind people's carefully constructed masks is often a daunting challenge. Yet, it is in times of adversity, under immense pressure, and in our most vulnerable moments, that our authentic character is laid bare. Silas Thorne's profound test served not only as a mirror reflecting the true state of his company but also as a profound reflection of the human soul itself. While Brenda and Chad ultimately drowned in the murky depths of their own consciences, Ilara's small, heartfelt act of kindness brought her a light she could have never imagined. It serves as a timeless reminder, though life may not always deliver what is seemingly deserved, those who harbor goodness deep within their hearts will, unexpectedly, receive the greatest rewards. For true wealth resides not in what is possessed, but in what is given, and one day, the seeds of a compassionate heart will blossom in the most unforeseen places, yielding the most beautiful fruits. We hope you enjoyed this inspiring story of justice. If Silas Thorne's revenge and Ilara's unexpected rise touched your heart, please remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel. On our channel, you'll discover many more compelling stories where hidden identities are revealed, evil finds its retribution, and kindness always triumphs. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to stay updated with our new videos. So, what are your thoughts on this story? 1. What do you think about Silas Thorne's test method? Do you believe it was a fair way to test his executives? 2. How do you feel about the punishment Brenda and Chad received? Do you think it was fair, or did they deserve more? 3. How did seeing Alara's small act of kindness change her life make you feel? Would you have shown kindness in a similar situation? Share your comments with us below. We're eager to hear your thoughts on the story. See you in our next video.